The silence of space was shattered when the Vengeance, Earth's first fully armed interstellar battleship, emerged from the void. It wasn't sleek like the ships of the Galactic Council. It wasn't adorned with elegant curves or delicate energy sails. No, the Vengeance was a brutal, towering beast of steel and fury, a testament to humanity's raw will to survive. The moment its shadow stretched across the galaxy, the once powerful alien empires shuddered. They had underestimated humanity. They had assumed Earth was weak, that its people were too fractured, too primitive to be a threat. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had attacked. And humanity had responded. Admiral Elias Carter stood on the bridge, eyes locked onto the holographic display before him. His face was hardened by years of war, the deep lines on his forehead telling the story of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. Around him, the officers of the Vengeance moved with precision, efficient, disciplined, ready. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Status report," Carter commanded. "All weapons primed, shields at full power," Lieutenant Hayes responded. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Anticipation. And the enemy? The display zoomed in, revealing an armada of ships belonging to the Zalari Dominion, one of the most powerful factions in the known galaxy. They had ruled through fear, their fleets conquering weaker species with ruthless efficiency. Until now. "They're holding position," Hayes said. "Scans indicate heavy armament, but they're hesitating, sir." Carter allowed himself the ghost of a smirk. The mighty Zalari, hesitating before a single human warship. They had good reason. The Vengeance was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It didn't rely on delicate energy weapons or sophisticated shield harmonics. No, Earth had built something far simpler, something far deadlier. The Vengeance carried kinetic railguns the size of city blocks, capable of firing projectiles at near light speed. It was lined with layers of ablative armor that could withstand anything short of a direct supernova. And hidden deep within its hull was the true horror, a weapon so devastating that it had been classified as humanity's final option, a weapon that could crack a planet in half. The Zalari command ship hailed them. A shimmering image of Lord High Warden Arval appeared, his reptilian features twitching with barely concealed rage. "Human," Arval hissed. "You dare bring your war machine into our domain?" Carter stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "I dare," he said simply. "You massacred one of our colonies. You thought we wouldn't retaliate." Arval's tongue flicked out in agitation. "That was a warning. Humanity was to know its place." Carter's expression darkened. "And this is our answer." There was a beat of silence. Then Arval laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You truly believe that one ship will stand against an empire?" Carter tilted his head slightly. "Your empire seems nervous." Arval's scales rippled, a sign of discomfort. He knew. They all knew. The Galactic Council had tried to keep it quiet, but rumors had spread. Whispers of a battle at the edge of the Orion Arm, where a single Earth destroyer had obliterated a Zalari fleet. They had underestimated humanity's war technology before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. "You don't belong in this galaxy, human," Arval snarled. "Leave now, and we will allow your species to exist, under our watchful eye." Carter leaned forward, his voice turning cold. "No." Then he gave the order. "Fire!" The first shot from the Vengeance tore through the void like a vengeful god's fist. A hyper-accelerated tungsten slug ripped through the lead Zalari battleship, shearing through shields and armor as if they were paper. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, and in that moment, the Zalari fleet realized the truth. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity wasn't afraid. Humanity had come to claim its place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. The moment the first Zalari battleship detonated, the battlefield erupted into chaos. The Zalari fleet, so accustomed to instilling fear in lesser species, suddenly found themselves facing a nightmare beyond their comprehension. Admiral Carter stood firm, his hands steady behind his back as he watched the battlefield unfold on the holographic display. The Zalari had numbers. Dozens of capital ships, supported by hundreds of fighters. But numbers didn't matter when their weapons barely scratched the armor of the Vengeance. "Enemy return fire incoming," Lieutenant Hayes reported, her fingers dancing across the console. "Brace for impact," Carter ordered, though he knew their ship could take it. The Zalari ships unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, streaks of blue and violet lancing through the void. The shields of the Vengeance flared as they absorbed the onslaught, but they held strong. Unlike the delicate energy barriers used by the Galactic Council's ships, human shielding was layered, reinforced, and built for endurance. Even as the Zalari pounded them with firepower that could reduce other warships to scrap, the Vengeance refused to yield. "Minimal shield degradation," Hayes confirmed. "Hull integrity at 100%. Carter allowed himself a small nod. "Good." "Return fire," he said. The ship's massive railguns thundered again, launching another volley of hyper-accelerated slugs. The Zalari ships scrambled to evade, but it was too late. 2 more battleships were torn apart as the unstoppable projectiles turned them into fireballs. The surviving ships broke formation, confusion spreading among their ranks. "Sir," Commander Patel spoke up from the tactical station, "we're picking up multiple distress signals from the Zalari fleet. They're calling for reinforcements." Carter's eyes narrowed. Of course they were. The Zalari had grown complacent over centuries of dominance, but they weren't fools. They knew they couldn't face the Vengeance alone. The real battle was about to begin. "Time frame?" he asked. "Estimates suggest their nearest reinforcements are 30 minutes out. Then we have 30 minutes to teach them a lesson." The order was given, and the Vengeance surged forward, cutting through the Zalari fleet like a predator among prey. The Zalari flagship, Dominator's Wrath, was unlike the others. Larger, more heavily armored, and commanded directly by Lord High Warden Arval himself, it loomed at the center of the enemy formation. But even Arval now understood what he was facing. "Fall back!" he roared, his scaled hand slamming against the command console. "Reposition the fleet! We must regroup!" "But my lord," a Zalari officer stammered. "Do as I command!" Arval snapped, his eyes flaring with rage. He had heard the reports, dismissed the warnings. The humans were supposed to be primitive, nothing more than a backwater species clinging to their fragile world. And yet, here they were, carving through the finest warships in the Dominion's fleet, as if they were nothing more than space debris. The Vengeance was a weapon of war, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and Arval knew, if they didn't stop it here, they never would. "Prepare the Annihilator cannons," he ordered. "If we are to fall, we will take these humans with us." Back aboard the Vengeance, Carter studied the tactical display. The Zalari were trying to regroup, forming a defensive line around their flagship. He almost admired their resilience. Almost. "Sir, the enemy flagship is charging a massive energy weapon," Hayes reported. "Estimated output? It's off the charts." Carter clenched his jaw. So the Zalari were done playing games. "Good. So are we. Deploy the Odin protocol," he said. The bridge fell silent. Even Hayes turned to look at him, eyes widening slightly. The Odin protocol was Earth's greatest military secret, something even the Galactic Council had only heard whispers about. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an extinction-level deterrent. But the Zalari had already shown humanity what they were capable of. They had slaughtered human colonies, massacred innocent civilians as a warning, and now they would see what it meant to provoke Earth. A moment later, deep within the bowels of the Vengeance, the Odin payload was armed. "Target the flagship," Carter ordered. "Fire." From the underbelly of the Vengeance, a single warhead detached, moving slowly at first, then accelerating at impossible speed. It wasn't a traditional missile, nor an energy weapon. It was something far worse. An experimental weapon powered by a miniature singularity. The Odin warhead struck the Dominator's wrath dead center. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to twist as the singularity detonated, tearing through the enemy ship with a force that defied the laws of physics. The Dominator's wrath didn't explode. It collapsed in on itself, pulled into a point of infinite gravity before vanishing entirely. One moment, it was the Zalari's pride and glory. The next, it was gone, erased from existence. The remaining Zalari ships panicked. Their flagship had been their rallying point, their symbol of strength. Now all that remained was fear. "They're retreating," Hayes said, her voice quiet, almost in disbelief. Carter exhaled slowly. "Let them go." The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never forget. The battlefield had fallen into eerie silence. The Zalari fleet, once the mightiest force in this sector of the galaxy, was now shattered, its remnants scattering into the void like frightened insects. The Vengeance stood alone, surrounded by the wreckage of its enemies. On the bridge, Admiral Carter took a slow breath, his mind already calculating the next steps. The battle was over, but the war had only just begun. The Zalari wouldn't forget this humiliation. They would be back, and next time, they would bring everything they had. "Status report," Carter ordered. "All systems nominal," Lieutenant Hayes responded, her fingers flying over her console. "Shields at 89%, minor hull damage, nothing critical. Odin payload successful, 0 residual anomalies detected. Casualties? Minimal. A few minor injuries in engineering, but all crew accounted for." Carter nodded. "Good. Damn good." The bridge crew remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of their victory settle. They had just done the impossible. They had faced down an empire and sent it running. But Carter knew better than to celebrate. War wasn't won in a single battle. "Admiral," Commander Patel spoke up, eyes fixed on the long-range scanners. "I'm picking up multiple incoming signatures, new contacts, not Zalari." Carter's jaw tightened. "Identification?" Patel worked quickly, then his face went pale. "Sir, it's the Galactic Council." The Galactic Council. The so-called Keepers of Peace. A coalition of the most powerful alien species in the galaxy, dedicated to maintaining balance and ensuring that no one race became too dominant. They had ignored Earth for centuries, considering humanity too primitive to be worth their attention. Until now. Carter clenched his fists. "They don't come when our colonies burn. They don't interfere when the Zalari slaughter our people. But the moment we fight back—" "How many ships?" he asked. "At least 20 capital-class vessels," Patel said grimly. "They're holding position just outside the debris field." A moment later, a transmission request lit up the main display. "Open the channel," Carter ordered. The image that appeared was of a creature Carter had encountered only once before, High Chancellor Veleth of the Galactic Council. Tall and elegant, with shimmering blue skin and piercing silver eyes, Veleth radiated the quiet authority of a being who had ruled for centuries. "Admiral Elias Carter," Veleth said, his voice as smooth as flowing water. "It seems humanity has made quite the statement today." Carter didn't move. didn't blink. We defended ourselves. Veleth tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. A single ship, annihilating a Zalari fleet? That is not mere defense. That is a declaration of power. Carter let the words hang in the air. He wasn't going to deny it. The Zalari murdered thousands of our people, he said finally. Where was the council then? Veleth sighed, as if Carter's words pained him. Politics is complicated. We do not involve ourselves in every conflict. There are rules, Admiral. Carter's expression darkened. Rules that allow genocide? Veleth didn't answer. Carter leaned forward. You're not here to help us. You're here because humanity just changed the balance of power, and that terrifies you. Veleth's silver eyes flickered. We are here to ensure peace, Admiral. Carter gave a dry chuckle. By threatening us? Veleth's voice remained calm. By making sure humanity understands the consequences of its actions. The meaning was clear. This wasn't a friendly meeting. This was a warning. Carter straightened. Humanity has learned many things in the past few years, Chancellor. The most important? We stand alone. And we survive. For the first time, Veleth's expression faltered. Just a fraction. Be careful, Admiral. Even the strongest species can fall. Carter met his gaze, unflinching. So can the Council. The transmission cut off. Silence returned to the bridge. Hayes exhaled. Sir, what now? Carter stared at the holographic display, watching the Council's ships hold their position. We go home, he said finally. But make no mistake, this isn't over. Humanity had revealed its strength, and now the entire galaxy was watching. As the Vengeance turned away from the wreckage-strewn battlefield, the crew remained silent. There was no celebration, no cheers for their victory, only the cold realization that they had just painted a target on humanity's back. Admiral Carter sat in his command chair, eyes locked on the swirling void beyond the view screen. He knew the Galactic Council wouldn't attack them. Not yet. They would posture, they would threaten, but they wouldn't make the first move. Not when the Vengeance had just demonstrated its terrifying power. But the Zalari? The Zalari would be back. Set course for Earth, Carter ordered. Maximum burn. The engines roared to life, and the Vengeance surged forward, leaving behind the ruins of the Zalari fleet. But even as they moved away, Carter knew this was only the beginning. Back on Earth, the world was already in an uproar. The battle had been transmitted across the system, and though the full details were classified, the people of Earth knew one thing. Humanity had struck back. The fear that had lingered since the Zalari's first attack was gone, replaced by something far more powerful. Defiance. In the towering halls of the United Earth government, debates raged. Politicians argued over what humanity's next move should be. Some called for diplomacy, for negotiations with the Council to avoid an all-out war. Others demanded retaliation, the complete annihilation of the Zalari before they could recover. And then there were the pragmatists, the ones who understood the truth. Earth was outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by enemies. If humanity wanted to survive, it would have to do more than fight. It would have to evolve. 3 days later, the Vengeance arrived in Earth's orbit. Carter stood at the forward observation deck, looking down at the blue marble that was home. It had been years since he'd last set foot on the planet, years since he had felt anything but the cold steel of warships beneath his boots. But there was no time for sentiment. "Admiral," came a voice behind him. "Commander Patel. The Council is demanding an emergency summit. They want to discuss limitations." Carter smirked. Of course they did. The moment humanity proved itself capable of standing toe-to-toe with the galaxy's strongest, the rules suddenly needed to change. What's the president's stance? She's cautious but firm. She wants you there. Carter nodded. Then let's give the Council something to talk about. The Galactic Council convened in neutral space, a grand station orbiting a dying sun. Carter had been here once before, years ago, back when humanity had still been naive enough to believe in diplomacy. Now, he walked the polished halls with the measured confidence of a man who knew he belonged. Inside the great chamber, the council members waited. Dozens of species, each seated in their respective sections, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely contained hostility. At the center, on the highest platform, sat Chancellor Velith. "Admiral Carter," Velith greeted, his tone carefully controlled. "Humanity has made quite the impression." Carter took his seat, leaning forward slightly. "You wanted to talk, so talk." A murmur rippled through the chamber at his bluntness, but Velith remained composed. "The Council acknowledges humanity's advancements. However, we must also acknowledge the danger such advancements present. We cannot allow unchecked militarization to disrupt the balance of the galaxy." Carter let out a dry laugh. Balance? Where was this concern when the Zalari wiped out an entire human colony? Velith's expression didn't change. The Council regrets those events, but retribution cannot be the foundation of diplomacy. Carter's eyes narrowed. Then what can? Velith leaned forward. Cooperation. Humanity must agree to limitations. No further warship production beyond what is necessary for defense. No deployment of singularity-based weapons, and no independent military expansion beyond your system. The chamber fell silent. The Council wasn't offering peace. They were offering containment. Carter looked around the room, meeting the eyes of alien representatives who had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant. Now they were afraid. "Good. You want us to stand still while our enemies prepare for round 2, Carter said. "That's not happening." Velith's expression darkened. "Then humanity will find itself alone, Admiral." Carter stood. "We always have been." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the Council in stunned silence. Humanity would not be controlled. And if the galaxy wanted war, they would find out just how far Earth was willing to go. Back aboard the Vengeance, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical map hovering before him. The Galactic Council thought they could contain humanity with words, with veiled threats wrapped in diplomacy. But Carter knew better. The Zalari were already regrouping, and the Council's so-called neutrality wouldn't last. "Sir, encrypted transmission from UEG Command," Patel reported. Carter nodded. "Patch it through." A hologram flickered to life, revealing President Evelyn Marshall. Her sharp green eyes locked onto Carter, her face lined with exhaustion, but her voice carried the weight of a leader who knew the storm was coming. "You've made quite the impact, Admiral," she said. "They were never going to let us expand," Carter replied. "The moment we proved ourselves, the Council started looking for ways to keep us leashed." Marshall exhaled slowly. "We have a problem. Intelligence reports that the Zalari are mobilizing. Their losses hit them hard, but they're calling in reinforcements from their outer colonies. The Dominion is preparing for full-scale war." Carter expected as much. The Zalari wouldn't accept defeat. Their pride wouldn't allow it. And now they had a reason to rally their forces, to destroy the upstart species that had humiliated them. "We need to strike first," Carter said. "Take the fight to them before they're ready." Marshall's gaze sharpened. "That's exactly what I was thinking. We can't sit back and wait for the hammer to drop. But this isn't just about the Zalari anymore. The Council is watching, waiting for an excuse to intervene." Carter crossed his arms. "Then we give them something they won't expect." Marshall leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" Carter turned to Patel. Bring up the Kepler black site. A new hologram appeared, a classified research station orbiting the frozen world of Kepler 62F, deep in human-controlled space. It was one of Earth's most secretive projects, a facility dedicated to developing weapons and technology that even the Council feared. Marshall's eyes narrowed. That project is still experimental, Carter. Are you telling me it's ready? Carter smirked. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be terrifying. 2 weeks later, humanity made its move. A fleet of Earth's most advanced warships, led by the Vengeance, slipped into Zalari-controlled space under the cover of subspace distortion fields. The Zalari had been preparing for an invasion, reinforcing their borders, deploying fleets along expected attack vectors. They never expected humanity to bypass their defenses entirely. The Vengeance emerged from subspace directly over Zalari Prime. Their homeworld. Alarms blared across the planet as defensive batteries powered up, but it was already too late. The moment the Vengeance arrived, the rest of the fleet followed, materializing like specters from the void. The Zalari government had no time to react. "Admiral, enemy fleet mobilizing," Patel reported. "Orbital defenses locking onto us." Carter took a slow breath. "Deploy the Kepler payload." From the underside of the Vengeance, dozens of sleek black drones detached, each no larger than a human torso. But these weren't ordinary weapons. Kepler 62F had given humanity something new: adaptive warfare, AI. The drones streaked toward the Zalari fleet, moving faster than any living pilot could react. The moment enemy ships opened fire, the drones learned, adjusting their movements, predicting attack patterns. Within seconds, they were weaving through defenses, slipping past shields, and latching onto hulls. Then, one by one, they began overriding enemy systems. The Zalari fleet turned against itself. Warships fired on one another as their systems were hijacked, their own weapons used against them. The Zalari Prime defense grid shut down entirely, surrendering orbital control to the human fleet. The battle was over before it had even begun. On the surface, the Zalari leaders stood frozen in their great palace, watching in horror as their mighty armada tore itself apart. Then a message came through, a simple transmission from the Vengeance, broadcast to every Zalari channel. Admiral Carter's voice, calm and absolute. "This is humanity's response." The war was over, but humanity's rule had just begun. The galaxy trembled. Zalari Prime, once the heart of an empire that had ruled through fear, now lay in silent submission beneath the shadow of the Vengeance. Their fleets were shattered, their defenses turned against them. And worst of all, they hadn't simply been defeated, they had been outclassed. Humanity had done the impossible. In the grand halls of the Zalari High Council, the remaining warlords stood in stunned silence as the human delegation entered. Admiral Carter led the way, his uniform pristine despite the battle, his expression unreadable. Behind him, armored human soldiers flanked the entrance, their presence a reminder that the age of Zalari dominance was over. Lord High Warden Arval, once the most feared warlord in the Dominion, now stood with his claws clenched behind his back, his scaled face twisted in barely concealed rage. "You have won a battle, human," he spat, "but this war is not over." Carter met his glare without flinching. "It is, and you know it." Arval's jaw tightened. His entire species had been raised to believe in their own superiority. The idea that humanity, weak, fragile humanity, had crushed them in open warfare was an insult beyond comprehension. Carter stepped forward. "You have two choices, Arval. Accept the terms and live, or refuse, and watch as we dismantle your empire piece by piece." The warlords exchanged uneasy glances. The Zalari were warriors, conquerors. They did not surrender. But this wasn't surrender. This was survival. Carter gestured toward the display behind him, where live footage showed the remains of the Zalari fleet drifting in the void. You thought we were weak. You thought we would break. But Earth does not break. He let his words sink in before continuing, his voice calm but unyielding. From this moment forward, the Zalari Dominion ceases to exist. You will disband your war fleets. You will submit to human oversight, and you will never raise arms against us again. Arval bared his teeth. And if we refuse? Carter's expression didn't change. Then I wipe your homeworld off the map. Silence. He wasn't bluffing. The Zalari had seen what humanity was capable of. They had seen the Kepler drones turn their own fleets against them. They had seen the Odin Protocol erase their mightiest warship from existence. They had seen what happened when Earth was pushed too far. One by one, the warlords lowered their heads. Even Arval, his body trembling with suppressed fury, finally exhaled and bowed. It was done. The Zalari, once one of the most feared empires in the galaxy, had fallen, and humanity had risen in their place. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Cheers erupted in the streets. Humanity had not only avenged its fallen, but had proven that it was no longer a fledgling species struggling to find its place. It had taken its place. In the halls of the United Earth government, President Marshall stood before the gathered leaders of the world, her voice resolute. Today marks the dawn of a new era. No longer are we prey to those who seek to rule us. No longer will humanity be pushed aside, ignored, or contained. We have shown the galaxy that we are not to be underestimated. The chamber erupted in applause. Humanity had spent centuries dreaming of its place among the stars. Now it had claimed it, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the distant reaches of space, deep within the Galactic Council's grand citadel, Chancellor Veleth watched the reports in silence. Humanity had just rewritten the balance of power. The Council had hoped to contain them. Now they had no choice but to prepare for the inevitable. Because if humanity could bring the Zalari to their knees, then no empire was safe. The Galactic Council convened in a state of emergency. For centuries, they had ruled the stars, their collective wisdom guiding countless civilizations across the cosmos. Wars were rare, and when they did occur, they were handled with calculated precision. Disputes settled with overwhelming technological superiority, diplomacy backed by fleets of ships so advanced that resistance was futile. But today, something had changed. A new species had entered the galactic stage, one previously overlooked as insignificant. Their world was a backwater in a quiet corner of the Orion Arm, a planet plagued by internal conflicts, primitive politics, and an unremarkable technological trajectory. At least, that was what the Council had believed. Now, a massive holographic projection hovered above the chamber, displaying a warship unlike anything they had seen before. It was human in design, blocky, brutalist, and covered in thick armor plating. It lacked the elegance of an elven craft, the organic fluidity of a Sylvani vessel, or the mathematical precision of a Zelvar Dreadnought. It was ugly, and yet it radiated an undeniable menace. This cannot be," murmured High Chancellor Varelian, his silken robes rustling as he turned to his advisors. "How did the humans build such a thing? They were barely capable of interstellar travel a century ago." The council chamber was filled with murmurs of disbelief. The warship, christened Indomitable, had arrived at the edge of council space only hours ago, its arrival triggering every warning system in the sector. It hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't made any demands. It simply existed. And that alone was enough to shake the foundations of the galaxy's ruling elite. Grand Strategist Threxar, a member of the reptilian Qatar Dominion, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. Perhaps they have stolen technology. There is no way they could have developed this on their own. His voice dripped with disdain. Humans are chaotic, violent, and short-sighted, a species prone to self-destruction. Ambassador Nira of the Silvani Collective shook her head. And yet, there it is, she said softly, gesturing to the projection. A warship larger than anything our fleets have, heavily armed, heavily shielded, and moving with a purpose. A cold silence settled over the chamber. Then, the central communication terminal flickered to life. A transmission had been received. From the humans. All eyes turned toward the display as the image resolved into a figure clad in dark navy blue fabric, adorned with golden insignia. A human. A leader. His expression was unreadable, yet his eyes carried a cold, calculating intelligence that sent a chill through the council. "This is Admiral Jonathan Kane of the United Terran Navy," the human said, his voice steady. "We are here as a courtesy. We are aware of the treaties in place regarding first contact protocols, and we respect them. However," he paused, letting the moment stretch before continuing, "humanity will not be ignored any longer." The chamber erupted into chaos. The council chamber was in turmoil. Voices overlapped, whispers of disbelief turning into heated debates. A species as young as humanity, bold enough to send a warship directly into council-controlled space? It was unthinkable, arrogant. And yet, there Admiral Jonathan Kane stood, staring back at them through the massive holographic display, waiting. High Chancellor Varelian raised a trembling hand, calling for silence. The chamber slowly quieted, though the tension remained thick. He straightened his posture and faced the human directly. "Admiral Kane," he began carefully, his voice a practiced blend of authority and diplomacy. "You arrive unannounced, aboard a vessel that defies all expectations. This Indomitable of yours. It is a warship, is it not?" Kane gave a slow nod. "That's correct, Chancellor." Varelian frowned. "And yet, you claim this is a courtesy visit? Do you understand what such an action implies?" The Admiral's lips twitched, though it was not quite a smile. "I do. And I also understand what would have happened if we had arrived in anything less than a warship." A silence followed. The meaning was clear. For centuries, first contact encounters had always been dictated by the Council's strength. New species were greeted not with open arms, but with a subtle display of power, swiftly shown their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Some were granted limited autonomy, others were guided into the fold. But humanity had seen through the game, and instead of bowing, they had arrived with a ship designed to survive. Grand Strategist Threxar's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. His scaled lip curled in irritation. "You presume too much, human," he hissed. "We have ruled these stars for thousands of cycles. We have seen countless civilizations rise and fall, long before your kind even grasped the concept of spaceflight. You are nothing but—" Kane cut him off. "With all due respect, strategist, we are not like the others." The chamber tensed. No species had ever dared speak to Threxar with such directness. The human admiral leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You see, our history has not been one of peace and harmony. We did not emerge under the watchful guidance of an elder race. We were not handed knowledge by benevolent overseers. We have fought for everything, against our own kind, against the elements, against the very nature of existence itself." He gestured subtly behind him, where a tactical display of Indomitable remained in view. "This warship represents what humanity is capable of when faced with an impossible challenge. You may have ruled these stars for thousands of cycles, but we have spent millennia learning how to survive against all odds." The weight of his words settled upon the council. Ambassador Nira, who had remained silent thus far, now spoke, her voice calm yet curious. "You speak of survival, Admiral, and yet you are here, not as a conqueror, not as a supplicant, but as what exactly?" Kane finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a razor-sharp certainty. "As a warning." Varelian's breath hitched. The chamber fell into a stunned hush once more. The Admiral continued. "For years, we have monitored Council-controlled space. We have seen how you treat those weaker than you, how you dictate the terms of their progress, how you decide who thrives and who remains stagnant." His voice grew colder. "That era is over." Threxar shot to his feet. "You dare threaten the Galactic Council?" Kane didn't even flinch. "Number I state a simple fact." He clasped his hands behind his back, his stance exuding confidence. "We have no desire for war, but we will not be assimilated, nor will we allow ourselves to be dictated to. Humanity will not kneel." He leaned in slightly. "And if anyone here thinks otherwise, I invite them to try." The hologram flickered off. The chamber sat in stunned silence, every leader present now faced with an undeniable truth. Humanity had arrived, and they were not afraid. The silence in the council chamber was thick with tension. No one spoke, no one moved. The holographic projection of Admiral Kane had vanished, but his words still echoed in the minds of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Humanity had made its stance clear. For centuries, the Galactic Council had dictated the terms of civilization, shaping the fates of species that ascended to the stars. Some were allowed to integrate peacefully, others were subjugated quietly, and a select few were destroyed before they ever posed a threat. It had always been this way. It was supposed to remain this way. But now, for the first time in living memory, an emerging species had looked upon the Council's authority and rejected it outright. High Chancellor Varelian finally broke the silence. "This changes everything." Grand Strategist Threxar sneered, his reptilian features twisting with contempt. "Number it changes nothing." He slammed a clawed fist against the table. "This is a single warship, nothing more. An overcompensation from a fledgling race that knows it cannot compete in true warfare." Ambassador Nira tilted her head. "You truly believe that?" Threxar's slit pupils narrowed. "I know it. Humanity is a young species, barely out of its cradle. They lack the infrastructure, the fleets, the logistical prowess to wage war against a galactic empire. One warship does not make them our equal. And yet, it is here." All eyes turned to the speaker, Lord Magistrate Velos of the Zelvar Dominion. His species, known for their cold intellect and mathematical precision, rarely spoke unless necessary. Velos regarded Threxar with a calculated expression. "A single warship sent alone into Council space," he said, "not to surrender, not to seek guidance, but to warn us." He folded his hands. The implications of such an act should not be dismissed so easily. Threxar scoffed. "Implications? They are posturing, bluffing. They know that if they act against us, we will wipe them from existence." Vilos's gaze did not waver. "Are you certain of that?" Threxar bared his fangs. "Do not insult me, Magistrate." Velos remained unfazed. "I state only the obvious. There are unknown variables at play." His glowing blue eyes flickered toward the massive hologram of Indomitable, still suspended above the chamber. "Consider this. Humanity has advanced centuries beyond what our projections predicted. How?" No one answered. "We assumed their species was primitive, that they would struggle with interstellar expansion for another 1,000 cycles at least." Velos leaned forward slightly. "Yet here they are, presenting a vessel that defies expectations. A warship, built for prolonged engagement. The question is not whether humanity is a threat now, but how they reached this point without us noticing. A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. With all due respect, strategist, we are not like the others. The chamber tensed. No species had ever dared speak to Threxar with such directness. The human admiral leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. You see, our history has not been one of peace and harmony. We did not emerge under the watchful guidance of an elder race. We were not handed knowledge by benevolent overseers. We have fought for everything, against our own kind, against the elements, against the very nature of existence itself. He gestured subtly behind him, where a tactical display of Indomitable remained in view. This warship represents what humanity is capable of when faced with an impossible challenge. You may have ruled these stars for thousands of cycles, but we have spent millennia learning how to survive against all odds. The weight of his words settled upon the council. Ambassador Nira, who had remained silent thus far, now spoke, her voice calm yet curious. You speak of survival, Admiral, and yet you are here, not as a conqueror, not as a supplicant, but as what exactly? Kane finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a razor-sharp certainty. As a warning, Varelian's breath hitched. The chamber fell into a stunned hush once more. The Admiral continued. For years, we have monitored Council-controlled space. We have seen how you treat those weaker than you, how you dictate the terms of their progress, how you decide who thrives and who remains stagnant. His voice grew colder. That era is over. Threxar shot to his feet. You dare threaten the Galactic Council? Kane didn't even flinch. Number I state a simple fact. He clasped his hands behind his back, his stance exuding confidence. We have no desire for war, but we will not be assimilated, nor will we allow ourselves to be dictated to. Humanity will not kneel. He leaned in slightly. And if anyone here thinks otherwise, I invite them to try. The hologram flickered off. The chamber sat in stunned silence, every leader present now faced with an undeniable truth. Humanity had arrived, and they were not afraid. The silence in the council chamber was thick with tension. No one spoke, no one moved. The holographic projection of Admiral Kane had vanished, but his words still echoed in the minds of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Humanity had made its stance clear. For centuries, the Galactic Council had dictated the terms of civilization, shaping the fates of species that ascended to the stars. Some were allowed to integrate peacefully, others were subjugated quietly, and a select few were destroyed before they ever posed a threat. It had always been this way. It was supposed to remain this way. But now, for the first time in living memory, an emerging species had looked upon the Council's authority and rejected it outright. High Chancellor Varelian finally broke the silence. This changes everything. Grand Strategist Threxar sneered, his reptilian features twisting with contempt. Number it changes nothing. He slammed a clawed fist against the table. This is a single warship, nothing more. An overcompensation from a fledgling race that knows it cannot compete in true warfare. Ambassador Nira tilted her head. You truly believe that? Threxar's slit pupils narrowed. I know it. Humanity is a young species, barely out of its cradle. They lack the infrastructure, the fleets, the logistical prowess to wage war against a galactic empire. One warship does not make them our equal. And yet, it is here. All eyes turned to the speaker, Lord Magistrate Velos of the Zelvar Dominion. His species, known for their cold intellect and mathematical precision, rarely spoke unless necessary. Velos regarded Threxar with a calculated expression. A single warship sent alone into Council space, he said, not to surrender, not to seek guidance, but to warn us. He folded his hands. The implications of such an act should not be dismissed so easily. Threxar scoffed. Implications? They are posturing, bluffing. They know that if they act against us, we will wipe them from existence. Violos's gaze did not waver. Are you certain of that? Threxar bared his fangs. Do not insult me, Magistrate. Violus remained unfazed. I state only the obvious. There are unknown variables at play. His glowing blue eyes flickered toward the massive hologram of Indomitable, still suspended above the chamber. Consider this. Humanity has advanced centuries beyond what our projections predicted. How? No one answered. We assumed their species was primitive, that they would struggle with interstellar expansion for another 1,000 cycles at least. Vilos leaned forward slightly. Yet here they are, presenting a vessel that defies expectations, a warship built for prolonged engagement. The question is not whether humanity is a threat now, but how they reached this point without us noticing. A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. Your arrogance will be your downfall, the Qatar strategist spat. You speak as if your species is untouchable, but let me remind you, you are alone. We could destroy your Indomitable in minutes. Kane exhaled slowly, as if he had been waiting for those words. Could you? A beat of silence. Then, with a flick of his hand, Kane activated a secondary display. A new series of markers appeared on the tactical map, this time behind the Council fleet. Varelian's breath caught. Threxar's sneer faltered. One by one, human warships began decloaking. Not just one, not just a dozen, hundreds. They had been waiting, silent, invisible, perfectly positioned, and now the hunters had become the hunted. Kane's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. I suggest you rethink your position, gentlemen. For the first time in history, the Council was no longer the most powerful force in the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and they had come prepared. The Council fleet stood frozen in space. A moment ago, they had been the undisputed power in this confrontation. Now they were surrounded. Hundreds of human warships, sleek and deadly, had emerged from the void like specters. Their formations were tight, disciplined. Not a single ship moved out of line. This was not an accident. This was not a bluff. This was intentional. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kane allowed the silence to stretch. He knew the psychological weight of a perfectly timed maneuver. Let them feel it. Let them understand what they were dealing with. Varelian's composed mask cracked, his eyes darting across the tactical display. Threxar, on the other hand, seethed with fury. Impossible, he growled. You were hiding these ships under our noses? Kane remained impassive. You assumed we were primitive. You assumed we were disorganized. You assumed you knew everything about us. He let those words linger before delivering the final blow. You assumed wrong. Varelian exhaled sharply, his mind racing. The Council's intelligence had failed them. The humans had built an armada in secret, undetected beyond the Council's reach. It defied everything they believed about the natural order. Threxar bared his teeth. This is treachery, trickery. His claws curled into fists. The Council will not tolerate deception from a lesser species. Kane's expression remained unreadable. A lesser species? He glanced at the display of the Council fleet, now surrounded, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. Is that still what you think? Threxar's nostrils flared. His pride demanded action, but even he was not blind to reality. If they fired first, the battle would be devastating, for both sides, and humanity was willing to fight. Varelian straightened his posture, regaining a measure of control. His voice was steady but strained. "Admiral Kane, we are now at a dangerous precipice." Kane nodded. "That we are." Varelian took a slow breath. "What is it that you want?" Kane studied the Chancellor carefully. This was the moment, the one that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. He stepped forward. "We want nothing from you." His voice was calm, but resolute. "We do not seek your approval. We do not seek your guidance. We do not need your permission." He let the weight of those words settle before continuing. "We are here to state a simple fact. Humanity is now a power in this galaxy. We will not be conquered. We will not be controlled. We will not kneel." Varelian's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Kane clasped his hands behind his back. "We will not fire unless fired upon. But know this, if a single human life is threatened, we will respond." His eyes met Varelian's. "And we will not lose." A charged silence followed. The Council had never faced a moment like this before. Never had a species declared its independence without asking. Never had a species entered their domain without fear. Humanity had done both. Varelian closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled. "I see." He turned toward Threxar, who looked ready to explode with rage. "Stand down." Threxar's head snapped toward him. "You cannot be serious!" Varelian's gaze was hard. "Do you wish to test them now, here, at this moment?" Threxar's jaw tightened. He wanted to fight. But he was not a fool. He could see the truth as clearly as anyone else in the chamber. A battle today would not end with a council victory. At best, it would end with everyone burning. With a snarl, Threxar slammed his fist against the table. "This is not over, human." Kane nodded once. "I never expected it to be." The communication link cut. The Council fleet remained motionless for several moments longer before slowly, reluctantly, retreating from the system. On the bridge of the Indomitable, a ripple of tension eased through the crew. They had done it. Humanity had not just survived its first encounter with the galactic powers. It had won. Commander Grant exhaled, shaking her head. "They'll be back, won't they?" Kane watched the Council ships vanish into the void. "Yes," he said quietly. "And next time, it would be war. But humanity would be ready. They always were." The Council's retreat did not bring relief, only a heavier sense of foreboding. Humanity had made its declaration, but in the halls of power, words were just the first step. The real battle would come later. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, hands still clasped behind his back, watching as the last Council ships vanished into the void. The silence that followed was not peace. It was preparation. "Orders, sir?" Commander Grant asked. Kane turned, his expression unreadable. "We leave." Grant hesitated. "We're just going to leave, after all that?" Kane nodded. "We made our point. There's no need to stay and tempt a mistake. Besides," he turned back toward the viewport, "they won't forget this, and they won't forgive it." She exhaled. "No, I don't imagine they will." The bridge crew remained silent, exchanging glances. Humanity had always fought its battles with overwhelming force, but this was different. This was a war of perception, a war of power before a single shot was fired. As the Indomitable prepared for departure, a secure transmission came through, bypassing the usual Council channels. A rogue signal, a shadow whisper. Kane's eyes narrowed as the encrypted message flickered onto his personal console. He gestured for Grant to hold the ship's departure. He read the message. Then he read it again. A slow, knowing smile crept across his face. "We are not alone. The Galactic Council may have ruled for millennia, but even empires cast shadows. And in those shadows, something had been watching, waiting. The encrypted message was short, but it was enough. There were others, species who had chafed under the Council's rule, who had lived as second-class citizens, forced into submission. They had watched humanity's arrival with quiet fascination. And now they saw something they had never dared to hope for. A possibility. A species willing to defy the Council. A species that did not beg for a seat at the table, but instead built its own. The message was an invitation. A meeting, deep within neutral space. A gathering of those who had long whispered of resistance, but never had the power to act. Until now. Kane tapped his fingers against the console, considering. This changed everything. "Commander," he said. Grant turned, eyebrows raised. "Sir?" "Change course. We're not heading home?" She frowned. "Then where?" Kane leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the weight of something far greater than a simple confrontation. "To see just how many others are ready to stand with us." The Indomitable turned, its engines burning bright against the void. The war hadn't started yet. But the resistance had just begun. The Indomitable cut through the void, its engines humming with restrained power as it left the Council's territory behind. Humanity had drawn the line, made its stance clear, but now something even more dangerous was unfolding. Admiral Kane reread the message on his private console. Coordinates encrypted, time-sensitive, no direct transmissions, no unnecessary attention. "We are waiting." The invitation was clear. Someone, or something, had been watching, and now they were reaching out. "Commander," Kane said, his voice calm but firm. Grant turned from her station. "Course plotted, but I don't like this, sir. We have no idea who we're meeting." "Neither do they." Kane folded his arms. "Which makes us even." The crew had been expecting to return home, to regroup, to prepare for the inevitable war with the Council. But this was unexpected. "Sir," Lieutenant Voss, the ship's intelligence officer, spoke up. "We've done some initial scans on the coordinates. The system is a dead zone. No registered colonies, no official trade routes." He hesitated. "Which means if something is there, it's been kept off every known record." Kane nodded. That was the point. The Council's reach was vast, but not absolute. There were always places beyond their control, places that had been forgotten or erased from the records. That's where rebellion grew. "Any signs of a trap?" he asked. Voss shook his head. "Nothing yet, but it's a good place for an ambush." Grant crossed her arms. "And we're just walking into it?" Kane turned toward the viewport, watching the distant stars slip past. "We didn't come this far just to play it safe." The system was dark. A dying star flickered weakly in the distance, bathing the scattered asteroids and frozen moons in a dim, reddish glow. There were no signs of civilization, no beacon signals, no planetary settlements, nothing. And yet, the Indomitable was not alone. "Contacts," Voss announced, his voice clipped. 5 ships, decloaking. On the tactical display, dark shapes flickered into existence. They weren't Council vessels. Their hulls were patchwork, a blend of different designs and technologies. Some were old warships, others modified civilian freighters, each one bearing the scars of a life spent on the run. These weren't conquerors, these were survivors. The comms channel crackled to life. "Terran warship, you are expected," a voice said. It was calm, measured, but laced with something deeper. Determination. "Transmit authorization code." Kane didn't hesitate. He sent the encrypted response embedded in the message they'd received. A brief silence. Then, "Welcome to the Ghost Fleet." The largest of the ships, a heavily modified battleship, powered its engines and guided the Indomitable toward a hidden structure nestled within the shadows of a shattered moon. As they approached, Kane saw what had been kept hidden for so long. A fleet. Not the polished, unified strength of a galactic empire, but something different. A force built from remnants, ships from species long thought to be under the Council's heel. Fighters bearing insignias of civilizations that had supposedly been integrated, and others that belonged to no known government at all. This was not an army. This was a movement. As the Indomitable moved into formation, Kane exhaled slowly. We are not alone. And if humanity had been the first to stand against the Council openly, they would not be the last. The docking bay of the hidden base was dimly lit, the glow of maintenance lights reflecting off the patchwork hulls of battle-worn ships. The air smelled of coolant, metal, and something older, like a place that had seen war but never surrendered to it. As Admiral Kane stepped off the Indomitable, he was met with silence. No formal greeting, no honor guard, just the quiet scrutiny of those who had been waiting in the shadows far longer than humanity had been in the stars. Then, from the gathered figures, a man stepped forward. He was tall, his features sharp and worn by years of conflict. His uniform, if it could be called that, was a mix of different military styles, patched together like his fleet. But his eyes were steady, like a man who had seen civilizations fall and still refused to break. "You're late," the man said, his voice rough. Kane met his gaze without hesitation. "We came as soon as we received your message." The man studied him for a moment before nodding. "I'm Commander Drell of the Ghost Fleet, and you, Admiral Kane of the Terran Navy, have just set fire to the galaxy's most fragile order." Kane let a small smirk touch his lips. That was the idea. Drell didn't smile back. Instead, he gestured for Kane and his officers to follow. As they walked through the corridors of the station, Kane took in everything: the makeshift repairs, the repurposed technology, the soldiers who carried weapons from a dozen different species. This wasn't just a resistance. It was a graveyard of forgotten wars. "You're wondering what this place is," Drell said without looking back. Kane nodded. "A hidden fleet, gathered from the remnants of those the Council crushed." Drell gave a short laugh. "Not crushed, not yet." He stopped at a reinforced door and keyed in a sequence. The lock disengaged with a hiss, revealing a war room lined with holographic projections of Council-controlled sectors. Scars of conflict marked every sector. Occupied worlds, lost battles, extinct species. And yet, among the red zones of Council control, Kane noticed something else. Clusters of systems marked in deep gray, unclaimed, hidden. Drell saw where his eyes lingered. "You thought you were alone," he said. "You're not." Kane exhaled slowly, absorbing the meaning. "How long?" Drell's expression darkened. "Decades. Longer for some of us." He pointed to the maps. "The Council doesn't tolerate defiance. Those who resist are either wiped out or forced underground." He turned to Kane. "Until now, we've had no way to push back." "And you think humanity changes that?" Kane asked. Drell folded his arms. "You already have. The moment you stood up to the Council and didn't break, you became more than a rogue species. You became a symbol." Kane considered this. "Symbols don't win wars." "No," Drell agreed, "but they start them." A heavy silence followed. Kane looked at the gathered leaders, each of them representing a species that had suffered under the Council's rule. Some had been forced into servitude. Others had lost entire homeworlds. They had spent years in hiding, waiting for something, someone, to prove that resistance wasn't futile. Now that moment had come. Kane stepped forward, his voice steady. "What do you need?" Drell's eyes flashed with something close to hope. A fleet that can fight. Kane nodded. Then let's get to work. The war had not begun yet, but the pieces were falling into place. And this time the Council would not see it coming. The war room pulsed with quiet tension. Holographic displays flickered, showing fleet movements, supply routes, and heavily classified data. Information the Council believed long buried. Admiral Kane studied the gathered leaders, each one hardened by years of oppression, exile, or war. They had survived not by overwhelming power, but by learning how to endure, how to hide, how to strike when least expected. But survival was no longer enough. Drell leaned forward, hands braced on the central console. We've harassed the Council's supply lines for years. We've sabotaged their infrastructure, disrupted their operations. But we've never had the numbers or firepower to do more than slow them down. His eyes locked onto Kane's. That's where you come in. Kane exhaled. You want the Terran Navy to lead the charge. Drell didn't blink. You've already started a war, Admiral. The moment the Council saw Indomitable, they realized they weren't the only ones capable of dictating terms. Now they're scrambling, but they'll come back, and when they do, they'll come to break you. Kane nodded. We expected as much. Drell straightened. Then we hit them first. A murmur of approval spread through the room. Some of the gathered leaders, those who had fought for decades without a true chance at victory, saw something different in this moment. Humanity wasn't here to survive. They were here to win. One of the leaders, an older, battle-scarred Osari woman named Yrel, stepped forward. Her species had once been a proud warrior race before the Council deemed them too aggressive and dismantled their fleets. You propose an open engagement? She asked, her voice deep and wary. A full-scale assault? Kane shook his head. Not yet. Drell raised an eyebrow. Then what? Kane activated the display, pulling up a specific system on the holographic map. It was a Council-controlled industrial sector, heavily fortified yet far from the core worlds. The perfect target. We cut their supply lines, Kane said. We hit them where they're weakest. If they want to bring the full might of the Council down on us, let's make sure they bleed for it first. Yrel bared her teeth in something close to a smile. You fight like a predator, Admiral. Kane smirked. Number, I fight like a human. Drell studied the map, then nodded. It's a good plan, but the moment we hit them, they'll know we're more than scattered rebels. They already know that, Kane countered. Now it's time to show them what that really means. Drell exhaled, then extended a hand. Then let's make this official. Kane clasped his forearm in a firm grip. The room seemed to shift in that moment, no longer just a gathering of survivors, but the beginning of something greater. The first true coalition against the Galactic Council. The first step toward war. And for the first time in centuries, the Council was about to be afraid. The Indomitable moved into formation with the Ghost Fleet, a silent predator among the scattered remnants of lost civilizations. What had once been a ragtag collection of fugitives and exiles was now reorganizing into something else. Something with a purpose. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching as the fleet coordinated its first operation. Across the tactical display, ship movements were being calculated, attack vectors planned. Their first target, Sivath 4, an industrial hub deep in Council-controlled space. It was a planet dedicated to shipbuilding, docks, refineries, and military installations. If they struck hard and fast, they wouldn't just cripple production, they would send a message. Kane turned to Commander Grant. Fleet status? Grant didn't look up from her console. Most ships are battle-ready, but they're not used to large-scale engagements. This will be the first time many of them fight in formation. Kane nodded. We'll give them a simple plan. On the war table, he marked the attack vectors. 3 strike teams. 1 will disable the orbital shipyards. Another will cut off planetary defenses. The third, indomitable and key assets, will engage their fleet directly. Drell, standing at the other side of the table, studied the plan. A direct engagement? His voice carried a mix of approval and warning. We don't have numbers on our side. We don't need numbers, Kane replied. We need a lesson. Drell exhaled. You're making this personal. Kane's gaze hardened. It is personal. For too long, the Council had dictated which species thrived and which ones withered in the dark. They had wiped out resistance movements before they could begin, crushed rebellions before they could form. Not this time. A silent tension filled the war room as the final preparations were made. The countdown to departure began. Sivath 4 wouldn't know what hit them. Sivath 4 Orbital Defense Command. The control officers in the station were completely unprepared for what came next. One moment, the skies over Sivath 4 were clear. The next, the void was filled with burning engines and incoming warships. Alarms blared as the station scrambled its defenses. Council cruisers powered up their weapons. Planetary shields came online. But it was already too late. From the blackness of space, the Indomitable surged forward, its massive guns spitting fire. Shock cannons ripped through the first defensive platforms, tearing metal apart like paper. Strike teams followed behind, weaving between the chaos, disabling key installations before they could mount a response. For the first time in Council history, they weren't the ones dictating the battle. They were reacting. The planet-wide alert system activated, sending distress signals across the sector. But no reinforcements were coming. The Council had grown complacent, believing no force could challenge them so directly. Now, they were paying the price. Kane stood at the command deck of the Indomitable, watching the battle unfold. Ships burned in the void. Explosions rippled across the orbital yards. Humanity had fired its first real shot, and the war had begun. The battle over Sivath 4 raged with a ferocity the Council had not seen in centuries. The orbital shipyards burned, their skeletal frames collapsing into showers of molten debris. Council cruisers fought back, their advanced weaponry tearing through several Ghost Fleet ships, but the tide had already turned. Admiral Kane watched the tactical display with a steady gaze, his mind sharp and focused. The Indomitable led the charge, its brutalist design shrugging off volleys of plasma fire as it carved a path through the enemy fleet. Strike teams darted between the chaos, planting charges on key installations and retreating before the Council could regroup. Commander Grant's voice cut through the noise of the bridge. Orbital defenses are down to 30%. The shipyards are crippled. We've got their fleet pinned. Kane nodded. Good. Signal the withdrawal. Grant hesitated. Sir, we could finish them here. No, Kane said firmly. This isn't about annihilation. It's about proving a point. Drell's voice crackled over the comms from his own ship. You're pulling back? We've got them on the ropes. Kane's response was calm but unyielding. We've shown them we can hurt them. Now we let them live with it. There was a pause, then Drell grunted in reluctant agreement. Understood. The Coalition fleet executed a precise retreat, vanishing into the void as quickly as they had arrived. Behind them, Sivath 4 smoldered, its once mighty industrial might reduced to wreckage, its defenders left scrambling in confusion and fear. The Council would not forget this day. Days later, the Indomitable and the Ghost Fleet regrouped in the shadow of the dead star system where their alliance had first been forged. The mood aboard the ships was a mix of triumph and grim determination. They had struck a blow, But they all knew what came next. In the war room, Kane stood with Drell, Yrel, and the other leaders. The holographic map now showed a galaxy in flux, council fleets mobilizing, their outer territories tightening defenses. The attack on Sivath 4 had sent shockwaves through their empire. "They'll come for us now," Yrel said, her voice steady but laced with the weight of experience. "They'll hunt us to the edges of the stars." Kane met her gaze. "Let them try." Drell folded his arms. "You've given us something we haven't had in decades, Admiral. A chance." Kane shook his head. "Not me. Humanity. And all of you." He stepped toward the map, pointing to the gray zones, the unclaimed systems where resistance still flickered. "We've shown the galaxy that the Council isn't invincible. That's all they needed to see." Yrel bared her teeth in a warrior's grin. "And now they'll rise." "They already are," Kane said. Reports had begun trickling in. Small uprisings on Council-controlled worlds, defectors slipping away to join the fight. The attack had ignited something the Council could not extinguish. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about freedom. Months later, the Galactic Council convened once more, their chamber filled with a palpable sense of dread. High Chancellor Varelian stood before the assembly, his silken robes no longer a symbol of unshakable authority. "The humans have allied with the remnants," he said, his voice heavy. "Their attack on Sivath 4 was only the beginning." Threxar snarled. "Then we crush them. We bring the full might of the Council." "No," Varelian interrupted, his tone sharp. "We underestimated them once. We will not do so again." He activated a hologram, a map of the galaxy, now dotted with red zones of rebellion. The gray had spread. "They've awakened something we cannot control," he said softly. "And they will not stop." The chamber fell silent. For the first time in millennia, the Council faced an enemy it could not predict, could not dominate. Far from the Council's reach, the Indomitable led a growing armada through uncharted space. Kane stood on the bridge, staring into the void. Behind him, the Coalition fleet stretched, a mix of human warships and the vessels of those who had chosen to stand with them. Commander Grant approached. "Reports from the outer systems, sir. More are joining us." Kane nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Good." The war was far from over. The Council would retaliate, and the battles ahead would be brutal. But humanity had done what no other species had dared. They had defied the stars, and in doing so, they had lit a fire that would burn until the galaxy was free, or until everything fell to ashes. The choice was no longer the Council's to make. It was theirs.